Seriously, just think about this for a minute. It's totally wild, right? Every single empire throughout history fought wars for land, for treasure, for the power we all know. But America, man, it did something completely different. Today, we only have one question we need to answer. Why does the US economy demand perpetual war? This is not just some policy of defense or anything like that. This is a system built purely for profit, a self-sustaining loop where every single bullet fired, every single crisis that pops up, it all feeds this massive machine. Now, hold on to your seat. If you don't stick with this video until the end, you will never look at the gas you pump at the station, the GPS on your phone, or even that Hollywood movie you watch the same way again. This isn't just about America's wars. We're going to talk about how an empire learned to monetize destruction and how that model now controls our wallets and the entire global economy. Because here's the bottom line. If making money from war is the business model, stopping that business model is not profitable for anyone. All right, let's head back to 1945, where this whole story begins. Now, just stop and think about it. World War II ends in 1945. The world is in ruins. Berlin, Tokyo, London, everything is just rubble. But there's one country that's not only untouched, but it's richer, stronger, and more industrially dominant than ever before. The United States of America. Europe's factories are gone, Japan's infrastructure is obliterated. But America's war production lines are still roaring, vroom, vroom, like nothing happened. Tanks, planes, weapons, all built at a scale no civilization had ever achieved. And here's the absolute killer point. Instead of shutting those factories down, the US found a brand new way to keep them running. Because, let's be real, peace was terrible for business. Before the war, America was inward-looking, isolationist. But the war changed everything. It wasn't just victory, though. It was a total reinvention. The government spent the modern equivalent of $4 trillion over those 4 years, 1941 to 1945. That money didn't just buy weapons, it built an entire economy. And by the time peace came, that military-industrial machine was so vast, so incredibly profitable, it simply couldn't stop. Factories needed contracts. Workers needed jobs. Corporations needed demand. So, how do you keep that demand going? The government looked around, and in 1947, the Cold War kicked off. Boom! A new kind of conflict that could last forever. No front lines, an invisible enemy, ideological, and totally perpetual. Could there be any better conditions for a business model that thrives on fear? I don't think so. Meanwhile, a 5-star general who became president, Dwight Eisenhower, spotted something forming inside and warned the country about it. This was 1961. In his famous farewell address, he called it the military-industrial complex. This was a power triangle involving the government, the military, and private corporations. War spending was now the actual fuel for economic growth. Eisenhower knew it was too late to stop it. He just wanted people to notice this monster before it completely swallowed the republic. So how does this system actually work? Think about it. Every war needs weapons. Every weapon needs research. Every research project needs funding. And that funding, your taxpayer money, flows not just to soldiers, but to defense contractors. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon. These guys aren't just making weapons, they are making profits from the anticipation of war. Look at the numbers. In 2023, America spent over $877 billion on its military. That's more than the next 10 nations combined. China, Russia, India, Japan, they all together still can't match it. Why? Because war is no longer just a response, war is an investment, man. Just stop and think about this for a second. Every time global tension rises, Ukraine, Taiwan, the Middle East, stock prices for defense companies explode. Missiles are launched? Markets celebrate. Peace talks succeed? They slump. This is a total flip of morality, right? Destruction is driving prosperity. And it's not just about weapons. The GPS in your phone? It was born from Cold War military funding. The internet itself? Same deal. Microchips, jet engines. It's all a side product of war. War became the mother of innovation. Could peace have achieved it? Of course, but funding fear is way easier than funding curiosity. But every system built on fear needs enemies to justify itself. During the Cold War, the enemy was the Soviet Union. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, this war machine faced a huge crisis. For the first time in half a century, there was no great rival. Budgets fell, factories slowed. For a brief second, we thought, maybe peace will break the cycle? And then what happened? September 11, 2001. The machine rebooted overnight. Terror became the new enemy. It was borderless, endless, and perfectly profitable. Between 2001 and 2021, over $8 trillion was spent on the so-called war on terror. That money didn't just go to soldiers. It went to contractors, consultants, tech companies, and even private armies. By 2010, there were actually more private contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan than US troops. They were building bases, running logistics, training forces. War turned into a subscription service. Every bomb drop generated an invoice. Even the withdrawal created new opportunities for cybersecurity and drone tech. This isn't speculation or some conspiracy theory, this is straight-up accounting. But there's a deeper truth here: America's economy depends on war. The dollar's global dominance, the bond market, the petrodollar system, it's all propped up by global military power. After World War II, the US anchored the world economy, Bretton Woods. But when Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971, the dollar needed a new foundation. And they found it in oil. The US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia: oil would only be priced in dollars. Meaning, every nation on earth that needed oil had to acquire dollars first. And how do you enforce that kind of global dependence? With the world's largest military, obviously. The petrodollar system was born. A marriage of money and might. War didn't just protect freedom, it protected the demand for the dollar. In 1953, Iran's Prime Minister Mossadegh was overthrown after nationalizing oil. In 2003, Iraq's Saddam Hussein suffered the same fate after proposing to sell oil in euros. Libya's Gaddafi planned a gold-backed African currency before his country was bombed into collapse. Coincidence, or consistency? War became a brand marketed under the label of democracy. Economists call this military Keynesianism. When consumer demand weakens, the government boosts military budgets, creating jobs. You build bombs instead of roads. The difference? Bombs don't create value, they destroy it. And that destruction constantly needs to be replaced. So the system sustains itself by making sure peace never lasts long enough to question it. Now, the US debt is over $34 trillion. Its currency isn't backed by gold anymore, it's backed by military might and market confidence. But confidence, like empires, doesn't last forever. History whispers a warning: every empire that turned war into profit eventually lost control of the costs. Athens, Spain, Britain. They all crumbled under debt, inflation, and disillusionment. America is no different. The debt is soaring, allies are losing faith. War is no longer a tragedy to avoid, it's a product to sell. Maybe history is leading us here. The empire of war has to confront the empire of debt. But let's remember, Eisenhower's warning still holds up. A nation obsessed with arms might forget the purpose of peace. Prosperity built on fear cannot last. Because even when it becomes a business model, war is still war, and every business eventually faces a reckoning. One day, the machine will stop. Not with an explosion, but just with exhaustion. And when it does, the world will have to remember what America once stood for. Not the empire of war, but the promise of peace. Because the answers aren't hidden in the future, they're written in the past.